In this video, we'll take a deep dive into the lore behind one of the more underrated demons in Megaten, and unquestionably the coolest demon in Hindu mythology, Shiva. Coming away from this video, I hope you'll gain a greater understanding on Hindu mythology from a lore perspective, and learn of Shiva's impact and contributions to the Shin Megami Tensei franchise. Shiva, the destroyer god, is a great ascetic who meditates high in the Himalayas on a tiger-skinned rug. He is usually depicted with matted hair and skin and covered in ashes from cremation grounds. At one point, to distract Shiva from his meditation, the god of love Kama attempted to shoot him with an arrow of lust for the goddess of the mountain, Parvati. In revenge, Shiva blasted Kama with fire from his third eye. Kama survived thanks to Parvati's pleas to revive him, but he now wanders the world without a body. Shiva married Parvati, and the couple gave birth to Skanda, a god of war, and Ganesha, the elephant-headed god. They both went on to become powerful demon slayers. Images often depict Shiva holding a trident known as a Trishula and riding on his bull Nandi. He's a god of opposites, at one aesthetic and erotic, a god who lays worlds to waste so that creation can spring up whole again. Ever the masculine god, he serves as the manly counterpart to the feminine Shakti of his wife Parvati. He's associated with the divine ambrosia soma and phallic symbols such as snakes and lingas. Shardam, literally meaning the four seats, are the names of four pilgrimage sites in India that are widely revered by Hindus for Lord Shiva. It comprises of Badrinath, Kednarth, Amarnath, and Somnath temples. Badrinath became prominent when Narayan, an incarnation of Vishnu, did tapasya there. At that time, the place was filled with berry trees. In Sanskrit language, they are called Badri, so the place is named Badrivan, or the forest of the berry. The particular spot where Narayan did tapasya, a large berry tree formed, covering him to protect him from rain and sun. Locals believe that Mata Lakshmi became the berry tree to save Narayan. Post-tapasya, Narayan said people will always take her name before his name. Hence, Hindus always refer to Lakshmi Narayan, unlike Shiva Parvati. It was therefore called Badrinath, or the Lord of the Berry Forest. This all happened in the Sat Yuga, so the Badrinath came to be known as the first Dham. According to legend, sage Bhryu was the first to have discovered Amarnath. A long time ago, it is believed that the valley of Kashmir was submerged underwater, and sage Kapashaya drained it through a series of rivers and rivulets. As a result, when the waters drained, Bhryu was the first to have darshan of Shiva at Amarnath. Therefore, when people heard of the Lingam, it became an abode of Shiva for all believers and the site of an annual pilgrimage, traditionally performed by lakhs of people in July and August during the Hindu holiday month of Savan. According to researchers, as per the belief of locals, the Gadaria community were the first to discover the Amaranth cave and saw the first glimpse of Shiva. The legend of the Kedarnath temple mentions Pandavas were searching for Lord Shiva to absolve themselves from their sins committed at the battlefield of the Mahabharata. Lord Shiva was in no mood to forgive them so easily, so he converted himself into a bull and went to Garhwal, site of the Uttakarand. On being found by the Pandavas, he dived into the ground. Different parts of the Lord came up at different parts. Hump at Kedarnath, arms at Tunganath, navel at Mataya, Meshwar, face at Rudarnath, and hair emerged at Kalpeshwar. Taken together, these 5 sites are known as the Panch Kedar. Pandavas got temples made at each of the 5 places. Regarding Somnath, it is one of the most significant pilgrimage sites and is believed to be the first among 12 Torchlinga sites of Shiva. The original temple was built by the moon god with gold in the Satya Yuga, by Ravana in Trega Yuga in silver, and by Lord Krishna in the Dwarparya Yuga in the sandalwood. Now that I've given you a detailed overview, let's examine Shiva through the 4 essential lore pieces from Hindu mythology. Shiva evolved as a combination of several gods and figures, with other gods being assimilated into his broader image. The most notable case of this involves a figure from the pre-Vedic Haparan civilization of the Indus Valley in modern Pakistan, which rose long before the Indo-European speaking peoples invaded or migrated into the Indian subcontinent. Scholars have been unable to decipher the writing systems of the Haparan civilization, so any link between Shiva and a figure from this period is all speculative. In the early 20th century, in the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists discovered a small clay seal depicting a figure sitting in what appears to be a lotus position, wearing exaggerated horns and surrounded by elephants and other animals. Scholars called the figure Pashupai, or Lord of the Beasts, which is a nickname of Shiva. The association between the two figures has remained ever since. The Shiva as we know him today arose out of a melting pot of Harappan, Vedic, and other Hindu gods, with each giving their own unique contributions to the modern version of Shiva. An essential piece of Shiva lore came from the story of burning of Kama. At one time, the demon Taranka grew so powerful from performing austerities or tapas and meditations that he convinced the god Brahma to bestow a favor upon him. Ever the clever demon, Taranka wished for power only to be killed by the son of Shiva. As Shiva was also a great ascetic, it was unlikely that he would take time away from his meditations to marry and have children. With the favor granted, Taranka ravaged the world and harassed the gods with his newfound invulnerability. Indra, the king of the gods, knew the only way to defeat the demon was to distract Shiva from his austerities long enough for him to marry and have children. He summoned Kama, who is the god of love and desire, to afflict Shiva with lust for the goddess Parvati. After flying up to Kailasa, Kama made the mountain erupt in bright flowers of spring. Water lilies bloomed and buzzed with bees, and mango trees grew heavy with their fruits. But Shiva was undisturbed at the wondrous display. It was not until Parvati came to offer him fruit that the god at last broke his meditation and gazed upon her. Seeing his chance, Kama shot an arrow of lust at the god, who fell in love with Parvati after admiring her beauty and grace. But Shiva knew of Kama's meddling and burned the god to ashes with the fire from his third eye in revenge for trying to afflict him with lust. Out of pity for Kama, Parvati asked Shiva to bring the god of desire back to life, but with his body completely incinerated, Kama was restored without any body or limbs at all, for which he called Ananga, or limbless. Now Kama roams the world as a disembodied spirit of love and lust. Indra's plan eventually worked. The couple gave birth to Skanda, who killed the demon Taranka once and for all. During the story of the birth and beheading of Ganesha, Shiva did not fully abandon his asceticism after marrying the goddess Parvati. Once the god was away from one of his many meditation retreats in the mountains, Parvati desired a heavenly attendant who would serve Parvati and Shiva perfectly. She then wiped the dirt from her body and took a bath and formed the god Ganesha out of his dirt, saying, "You are my son, you are my own. I have no one else to call my own." With the newly born god formed and clothed, she sent him off to serve as a gatekeeper of the house and told him not to let anyone into her quarters. Sometime later, Shiva returned unexpectedly from his meditations, and Ganesha followed his mother's orders and refused his entrance. He even went so far as to beat Shiva with a staff to shoo him away. Even after Shiva told the boy that he was Parvati's husband, Ganesha refused to budge and struck Shiva off again with his staff. Understandably angry at being turned away from his own house, Shiva lopped off Ganesha's head with his trident. Out of grief for her son's death, Parvati wept and created a whole host of goddesses, who she ordered to devour all the gods, sages, and demons of the world. She vowed that only restoring her son to life would stop her terrible anger. Even Shiva was distressed at this, and all the gods took counsel together. Shiva decided to fix his mistake. He sent gods out to kill the first person they met and attached the head of Ganesha to the body. Shiva decided to fix his mistake. He sent the gods out to kill the first person they met and attached the head to Ganesha's body. After coming upon an elephant, they chopped off its head and fixed it to Ganesha. They then brought the body back, sprinkled it with holy water, and muttered prayers to Shiva, and the body at once came back to life. With her son restored, Parvati stopped her onslaught of heaven and rejoiced. For this part, Ganesha was made chief of Shiva's warriors and attendants. Now, let's discuss the burning of Tripura and another essential lore piece pertaining to Shiva and his battles against the Titans. During the burning of Tripura, Shiva's destructive potential swayed the tide of many battles between the heavenly Devas, or gods, and the Asuras, who are Titans or demons in Hindu mythology. After suffering a defeat, the demons Maya, Taranka, and Vindhumalan performed severe austerities in order to gain the attention of Brahma in hopes of being granted a favor. They mingled their bodies, barely ate, sat between fires during the hottest part of the day, and dove into cold water in winter. Impressed by their efforts, Brahma eventually came down and offered Maya one blessing. The demon wished for a grand city impregnable to the gods, so that he and his people could be safe from their wrath. But Brahma refused this request, saying that no city could ever keep out the gods. Maya relented only slightly and asked for a city that could be destroyed by one thing, and one thing only: a single arrow shot by Shiva. This was enough to appease the god, and at once a magnificent city sprang up with markets, palaces, roadways, fountains, gardens, and lotus ponds, and every luxury the Titans could ever dream of. It was in fact 3 cities, one for Maya, which was made of iron, one for Taranka, made of silver, and one for Vindhumalan, made of gold. Because of this, it was called Tripura, or Triple City. For a time, the city prospered. The Asuras lived peacefully and even righteously, chanting Vedic hymns and holding Brahmins in high honor. But in time, Tripura darkened, and its people fell into vice and began assaulting Brahmins and gods once again. The gods knew that the city's days were numbered now, begging Shiva to join them in the fight. They reminded him that only he could end the war and destroy the Triple City. In his heart, Shiva wailed and moaned the terrible deed he was about to do. The Asura Maya was in reality a passionate devotee of Shiva, as he only knew that the demon would soon meet his end. but as he descended upon the Tripura riding his bull Nandi, the bull warned Maya to flee before it was too late. Shiva fired his one and only arrow and struck all 3 cities at once, and they went up in flames as easily as they were built. Men, women, and children, animals alike all perished, and the city roared with the moans of people crying for their loved ones. Even the sea surrounding Tripura boiled and cooked all the creatures of the ocean. But Maya listened to Nandi's warning and was able to flee the city with his household, one of only a few to escape the god's wrath. With that single arrow, Shiva laid waste to the Asura's nearly impregnable city and ended the war. Now allow me to discuss one more lore piece with you, and that is the mythology regarding Shiva swallowing poison, which is another very essential lore piece. Just as the Olympian gods in Greek mythology fought against the Titans, so too did the Hindu gods or devas fight against the Asuras for control over the cosmos. At one point, the gods began to fare poorly in the war, so they contrived the trick to gain an edge over their Asura rivals. The 2 sides agreed to create the heavenly ambrosia, Amrita, which would make both Devas and Asuras immortal if they drank it. To create the Amrita, the gods and demons churned the waters of the ocean using Mount Mandra as a churning stick and the great snake Vasuki as the cord. In time, the herbs and plants of the mountain mixed with the waters of the ocean and became milk, then clarified butter. All sorts of miraculous beings and substances were poured out of the churning sea, like the goddess Lakshmi, the ritual drink Soma, and heavenly horses and elephants. One of these substances was the terrible Hala Hala poison, which amazed the gods at the mere smell of it. Knowing the harmful potential of such a poison, Shiva drank it and held it in his throat so that it could not threaten the world. But the poison was so nasty that the god's neck turned blue, hence his epithet Nilakantha, meaning blue throat. Now that we've covered what I feel is some of the key lore pieces regarding Shivas, let's examine their impacts on the Shin Megami Tensei franchise. As you might expect, a god with such popularity as Shiva has most certainly had an impact in the Shin Megami Tensei franchise. Let's examine how Shiva has played a part in the games over the years in various ways. One prevailing thing to note, as you'll see, is a similar fusion method for Shiva, as this has stayed consistent throughout the franchise. I will note, however, that there are spoilers for multiple games, and that Shiva will be explained in the games that have a more prominent impact as opposed to just a simple fusion, as they cover over 30 games. In Shin Megami Tensei, the traditional method of fusing Shiva from Barang and Rangda originated from the first game. Shiva is the highest recruitable Tenma, and, like Vishnu, Shiva cannot be fused with any other demons. The game won't even create a slime from fusion, and will never make any fusions. You can say that this is the game that really started it all for Shiva, and there were no slouch in this game to that regard. In Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, Shiva appears as a distinct, powerful demon that cannot be encountered nor recruited by the Demi-Fiend. Instead, it can only be summoned once the Demi-Fiend reaches level 95 or above and performs a special fusion consisting of demons, Barang and Rangda. In Shin Megami Tensei 4, Shiva returns as a special fusion between Barang and Rangda. The Terminal Guardian uses Barang and Rangda to defend the final terminal. When they are defeated, he fuses them into Shiva and resumes to fight. In Shin Megami Tensei 5, Shiva is the leader of the Indian branch of Bethel, although he himself seldomly acts on his own and uses Vasuki to do most of the work for him. The protagonist can meet him in a lead line next to the area where Vasuki was defeated, meditating in the summit area, which he did design. The protagonist must be level 80 or higher in order to enter. He is surprised to see him and states that he has no intention for the throne, as they will inevitably bring forth corruption and that the world should be left for him and Brahma. It's his belief that should not be allowed to create the world, but rather to have the beings themselves be created anew. Agami will ask the protagonist if they should fight him, beginning a universe in peril quest. If the protagonist chooses to challenge him, Shiva will be surprised, but accept. Once defeated, Shiva congratulates the protagonist for defeating him, but warns him that there are many forms of Rudra that he should overcome if he wishes to become a true leader before dying. He is unlocked for fusion afterwards, requiring a special fusion of Barang and Rangda. He's the strongest fury in the game, and does retain his Tendava skill. In Shin Megami Tensei Imagine, Shiva appears as a powerful event boss, spawning with Nandi, Parvati, and Ganesha. Acquiring his plugin within the game requires achieving the highest monthly score within the Ultimate Battle Coliseum and completing the Champion course. He can be fused by a Kart Kia variant, Parvati and Ganesha. Only after Rangda and Barang's plugins were implemented were players able to fuse him in the traditional double fusion. For Demi Kids Light and Dark, in the light version, you can face Shiva in a battle after achieving the good ending and continuing the story. In Megami Ibunroku Persona, at level 96, Shiva is the highest level persona of the Chariot Arcana. The game does not follow the tradition of fusing Rangda and Baron. Instead, the protagonist used to fuse the Kwanka and Ganesha and add the totem Maxi Tempest, dropped by Fenrir. Upon being released in the Velvet Room at max rank, Shiva produces a Scorching Tablet. In Persona 3, Shiva appears as one of the personas of the Tower Arcana. Following the tradition of Shin Megami Tensei, Shiva's fusion prerequisite requires the protagonist to perform a special fusion consisting of Barang and Rangda. Shiva, alongside with Parvati, also grants the accessibility to the fusion spell Ardhanhari. Shiva is also the only persona that has access to the skill Paralaya, which deals severe pierce damage to all enemies with chances of inflicting fear status. It is also the strongest all-enemy pierce type skill. In the remix, fusing Shiva with a Nihil weapon grants the strongest spear type weapon, Pinaka. In Persona 4, Shiva appears as the ultimate persona of the Tower Arcana. Similar to its predecessor, Shiva's fusion prerequisite still requires the special fusion of Barang and Rangda. In Persona 5, Shiva is the 5th persona of the Judgment Arcana and can only be obtained through fusion in the Velvet Room. The protagonist must use Barang and Rangda in a fusion to summon Shiva. He's the second of 3 personas to learn the Psycho Force skill, and the first persona to learn Riot Gun and Psycho Blast. When itemized through the Electric Chair execution, Shiva produces the Megiddo Fire Shotgun for Ryuji Sakamoto, which has 380 attack and 98 ACC, while firing 3 times per turn, and its a critical rate up, effect low to Ryuji's gun attacks. Shiva is one of the ingredients required to summon Artha through a special fusion with Parvati. In Digital Devil Saga, Avatar Turtor 2, Shiva appears as an optional boss in the Eastern Room with the 6th layer of the Sun 3F, opposite in the room in which Vishnu resides. To challenge them, the party must have collected the Pinaka item from Parvati, which can be found on the 5th layer of the Sun onwards. Shiva will test the party's worth, stating that he cannot be defeated, then the world does not deserve to exist. After being defeated, the Aksara mantra will become available from the terminals. The party can also collect the turn ring from Shiva's chamber, which adds 1 turn icon for the party. In Devil Survivor and Devil Survivor 2 Record Breaker, Shiva is sought out during the 5th day because his Patsupada is the only thing capable of shooting down Alioth from its otherwise unreachable altitude. As Shiva is known as the Lord of Dance, and expert dancers needed to coax him out, Hinako Kujo volunteers for the job of reviving him. After he and Kama are successfully revived, the myth involving the 2 gods is reenacted. Kama shoots Shiva with an arrow, and the enraged Shiva incinerates him with his Pasupada, knocking Alioth down in the process. If the protagonist does not support Daichi, Shiva appears during the fight with Hinako and Jungo. Defeating Shiva unlocks the ability to fuse him in the Cathedral of Shadows. Much like all of his other incarnations in previous games, Shiva can only be fused by using Rangda and Barang. In Record Breaker, Shiva can appear in the DLC stages should the protagonist reach level 75, where he appears as a random encounter with a powerful Garuda and Ananta. In the Devil Survivor 2 animation, Shiva plays a part in bringing down Alioth. However, this version of Shiva does not speak, and the process of summoning him seems to go faster than in the original game, where the protagonist was required to protect Hinako from multiple demon teams. This time, however, no such complication existed. Additionally, rather than be provoked from being hit by arrows, Shiva became angry at the sight of Kamba himself, which prompted him to immediately throw Pasupada at his rival. In the process, Pasupada hit Alioth's core directly, bringing a swift death and leaving the shell to fall. Lastly, Shin Megami Tensei Liberation DX2, Shiva doesn't really have too big of a part in the game other than a standard fusion and battle, which is pretty par for the course with many demons in DX2. With all the major points being covered, I also feel that it's worth noting that Atlas stayed true to the Hindu mythology with Shiva's design, and didn't really try to go in another direction like some other franchises may choose to do. I also feel that the Shin Megami Tensei games, you really are rewarded not only for defeating Shiva in battle, but once you fuse them. This demon is such a monster that the endgame for most of these games becomes rather trivial. Dare I say that Shiva is even underrated in the series? Sometimes it feels that way with multiple demons across many different mythos. Well guys, that concludes the video on Shiva. I hope I was able to expand your knowledge base not only from a Hindu mythology perspective, but also shine some light on just how influential this demon has been over the years. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and help grow the channel. See you in the next video. Snar Soldier out.